everyone, my name is Jenna, but you guys can call me Jen, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome to a discussion video. This one has been inspired and basically given to me by my lovely friend Sophie. We were talking a couple months ago about, was it a couple months ago? Maybe it was last month. I can't really remember, but we were talking about a book that I was reading that I just was not liking. I wanted to DNF it, but I didn't, because it was part of my friend's TBR video, if you guys have seen that video. But she was like, you should do a video about like discussing DNFs and discussing stuff like that. And I was originally just like, well, you know what? My policy on DNFing is very simple. And she's like, yeah, well, you could make it more of like a reader's bad habits video. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to discuss some of my bad habits that I have as a reader and as a person on the book internet. As a caveat, I'm calling these bad habits because usually around the internet, they are either seen as a little bit controversial or seen as like people will never do that, or they just can't like wrap their mind around it, or they think it's blasphemous to do. So I myself will say right at the top of this video, you do whatever you want to your books, you read whatever you want, as long as it sparks joy in you. That's great. That's literally the only thing that I think should be the rule for reading. Do whatever you want to your books, read whatever you want. All right, so the first one we'll talk about are my DNFs. So if you do not know what that means DNF means did not finish, which essentially just means you've put down the book, you've decided to not finish it. You've read a portion of it, you say, no, I'm throwing this at the wall, and you never go back to it. It's like an official declaration on the book that you just don't want to waste your time with it anymore. And I am an avid DNFer. If a book is not sparking joy, I will set it down and not go back to it. Sometimes I will say I do find books that I'm just not enjoying in the moment, and I kind of rationally understand that I might enjoy this in the future, but at the moment I'm just not into it, so I put it down. And I mark it as like a tentative DNF, but on Goodreads, they all go into the same shelf. They all go into DNFs. And I think actually you can make like a shelf kind of like your want to read and read shelves. You can add another one of those kind of shelves as a like read but marked as DNF. I can't really remember how I did it, but I've done that on Goodreads, and I usually mark books like that as DNFs. When it comes to DNFs, I don't know if anyone else is like this, but I usually like to give myself a little bit of leeway when it comes to the books. I can know within the first 10 minutes of reading or the first 5-6 hours of reading whether or not a book is for me or not. Usually I will try to make it to the 100-page mark with some books, depending on the length. If it's a fantasy book, I try to push it to 150 just to make sure that I'm like, I don't know, just not in a weird mood and like the hook of the story actually gets me. But when I DNF a book, it is usually for good reason. It is usually for a fairly good reason, which means either it could be anything from like the writing style does not jive with me. That happened to me when I tried to pick up an R.A. Salvatore fantasy book. I got like 100 pages in and I had no idea what was happening. I hated the writing style and I was just not intrigued by the story at all, so I put it down. Another thing is exactly what I just said. I was not intrigued by the story, so either I'm just bored or I don't know, I just not wanting to read it anymore. I will put it down. As simple as that. Not making me happy, putting it down. And if I'm not enjoying it or I'm not intrigued at all, I will put it down. That actually recently happened to me as well in a very specific way. I was reading Winter's Orbit, which is a sci-fi romance book, and I got about 100 and I don't even know, I got like 100 pages in and I was not feeling it, but it was the kind of thing that I'm like, I should be liking this. Why am I not liking this? The writing style was a little bit weird, and I was having troubles with the audiobook narrator as well, because I was tandem reading the audiobook with reading. I was trying to push myself through it because I was also filming a video, and I got to the point where I was like, I don't know if this is going to turn around for me. So in that case, I decided to make it to page 150 and then make my decision. And once I reached page 150, I still couldn't make a decision on my own. So I was still irritated with all the things that were irritating me, and it just wasn't jiving. So I went on Goodreads and I looked at some of the other reviews and found that it decoded what was going on in my head. And in that moment, it was because it was riddled and like the entire story was like braced on the miscommunication trope, with a little like extra caveat of like the unwillingness to communicate trope. So there was, and the miscommunication trope is my least favorite trope of all time. I detest it. People just need to talk to each other. And so I decided to put it down at about page 160 once I got a little bit further, because I was like, well, maybe if there's a little bit extra here, but there were too many things that were annoying me in the plot and all that kind of stuff. And from that moment, because it was a romance book, I did, and I guess it's not really a romance book, it's a sci-fi book, but in that moment I was like, I can basically decode what's going to happen in the rest of this book. So I didn't even need to look up a summary online. I just put the book down and I said, you know what, for now we're going to put it down. That one was a tentative DNF that has since turned into a permanent DNF. I don't think I will ever go back to that book. DNFs for me, really, are just whether or not I personally jive with the story for the most part. There are books that I have read or have tried that I am immediately thrown back by because they are problematic. And I didn't realize they were, or they were written by a problematic author and I didn't realize they were before I picked up the book. In a case like that, it is a hard DNF without question. So it's just a matter of me personally finding books that really spark joy with me and whether or not they continue to spark joy, of course. Because again, I can get halfway through a book and stop reading it. I have done that with so many books throughout my entire life. It's actually ridiculous at this point that I've been like this since I was a kid. I would get like partway through a book and I would put it down, put it back on my bookshelves and completely forget that I was even reading it until like years later and go back and be like, oh yeah, I got about halfway through this book. I wonder if it was actually good. I did that originally with Graceling by Kristen Cashore. I read that when I was like 14 maybe. I got halfway through it, I just put it down and never picked it back up. But in that case, I was wrong on that DNF because it was a very good book. But I don't think I like officially DNF'd it in my mind. I just forgot about it, which I do a lot as a mood reader. I just, you know, pick up books and keep going. And I did it most recently with Robert Jordan's The Dragon Reborn, the third one. I'm halfway through that. And I do want to keep reading it, but the last time I picked it up was last year in December. So I don't know when I'm going to pick that one up again. And at this point, I probably will have to restart it or at least look for a summary online to remember what the first half was about because it's been so long. But yeah, that's probably one of the more talked about bad habits of readers is DNFing. And a lot of people are always like, oh, like, I don't know how to DNF. I don't feel right DNFing. And honestly, most of the time, those people, if they feel like they can't DNF a book if they're not enjoying it because of like some, I don't know, power beholden onto them that they have to put the time in to finish this book because they've already put time in to get to where they are. To those people, to you, I say, put the damn book down. You deserve to read better books. It doesn't matter what this book is. I don't care if you're like, well, I'm a little bit curious as to how it ends. Look up a summary online. If you're not enjoying your reading experience, you're not reading right. Like, reading is supposed to be fun. Reading is supposed to be a pastime that you enjoy, reading things that you love and really just have fun with. So if you're not enjoying the book you're reading, put it down. I promise you, it's not gonna hurt not knowing how that ends or not actually finishing it. You're not betraying anybody. Who you're betraying by finishing that book is yourself for reading a book that was mediocre. I promise you. And to those people who are like, well, what if I actually end up enjoying it? 90% of the time you're not if you don't enjoy the first whatever chunk of the book you're reading because the author has told you what kind of tone they're setting out. The author has told you kind of like what the writing experience is, what the story is going to be in those first however many pages. So I don't see how that could turn around. In the rare occasion that it does, I still usually only give those books 3 stars. So why waste your time reading 3-star books when you can read 5 stars that you absolutely love? So I know DNFing is hard for some people because they get into their brain, but I promise you, it's worth your time to DNF these books. I promise you, this one bad habit is worth your time to pick up. On that same train of DNFs, let's talk about reading slumps. So, reading slumps and mood reading, I think I'm going to talk about because I myself am a mood reader, which is becoming a bad habit of mine. And I recognize that because I think I have like 7 books on the go right now on my Goodreads currently reading list at least, which, you know, includes about 3 that I'm actively reading, maybe, which, you know, is fine. But I think that, for me at least, reading slumps come when I am overwhelmed with how much I have on the go and whether or not something is actually working for me. I have not been in a true reading slump, like other people say that they just can't read at all, they just don't pick up books or whatever for months on end. I have not been in a true reading slump since I was a kid. I read Harry Potter, and then after that, nothing was good enough. Nothing in my head was going to stand up to that series, so why even try? Which is what stuck me in a reading slump for quite a long time and deprived me of reading fantastic books that I know I would have loved at that age, like Percy Jackson or any other middle grade at the time. There was so much out there. I don't know why I just didn't get over myself, but that was the last time that I've been in a true reading slump. There are, you know, waves, ups and downs of like a roller coaster of my reading throughout the year, which is totally fine. It's dependent on my writing, it's dependent on how busy I am in life, how tired I am because of work, that kind of thing. But reading slumps in particular are very interesting to me as a mood reader because I can feel myself slumping, I guess is the word, on certain genres when I've read too much of them or too much of one kind. So as a mood reader, I like to read a variety of things all at once. I will not let myself pick up two similar fantasies, for example, at the same time. I've made the mistake of doing that recently and immediately was like, oh, I can't read these in tandem because they are the same story in my head now, and I cannot do that. So I like put one to the side and finished one before continuing with the other. So it's one of those things that I like to keep the genres separate, I like to keep the tones separate and kind of dabble through that. So usually my kind of rule is that I have like one high fantasy on the go, and then I might have like a lesser fantasy on the go, or I might have a literary fantasy on the go, like when Women Were Dragons, for example. So I could be tandem reading something like this and something like this, and then I might even pick up, oh, who knows, a fun sci-fi, and I would read these in tandem, kind of a thing. So I'm keeping myself fresh, and I'm letting myself pick in the moment what genre, which story I want to dive back into. And as a mood reader, that can get excessive because I just keep starting books when I want to start them. When something's interesting me, I go, okay, let's start it. So I recently started this sci-fi, A Memory Called Empire by R. Katie Martine. I'm about 160 pages in, and it's probably been about 5 days since I've touched it because this is just a level of sci-fi. I was really enjoying the story that my brain doesn't want to latch onto right now. It wants fun, happy books right now. So I haven't actually read any of my current reads recently because most of my current reads are pretty dark. So today, I also, because I had this library book due, I picked up this little novella, Spear, which is a Arthurian retelling that is queer and that is fast. And so I was immediately like, okay, this might be a good palate cleanser. And it was. This was delightful. And I really, really enjoyed it. And it wasn't this dark, heavy, brooding fantasy or sci-fi that I was reading that was really dense to get through. It was beautifully written. And it felt like I was going through something that was just, I don't know, like a fairy tale. So again, mood reader. Lots of books on the go, which lends itself to my special brand of reading slumps, which is where I get into these levels of like, I have 5, 6 books on the go. I don't want to really read any of these. I'm going to pick up another one. And then I pick up another one. And then suddenly I have 9 books and I get overwhelmed with how much I have to read. So I don't read any of them and I watch content instead. And to break through that, usually I try and see if there's like the smallest one I have on the go or the one that I have to finish sooner for a video or something. I power through that as fast as I can alongside the audiobook, which is probably not very good either. I just like right through. If one sitting, I can do that. That usually unlocks me into reading more of them and getting more of them off my currently reading list and giving me like a sigh of relief. So that's kind of the level of slump that I go through as a reader, which leads me to kind of like the next tend-to-me bad habit of mine, that is wanting to read books in one short sitting, which is easy when you have little books like Spear, for example, or one of Becky Chambers' novellas, right? Any novella is really easy to to read really fast, right? But I've talked about this before. I think it was on my TikTok. I am the kind of person, and it's tied into my mood reading a little bit, because I'm the kind of person who will want to read an entire fantasy book in like 4 hours, because if I don't do that, I will get irrationally angry with myself that I can't consume this piece of content in this really tiny scope of time and like get it all at once, get through the story one sitting it, just kind of like that, and so that I can get through more books faster. And it kind of hinges on the mood reading thing, because sometimes I will only be in the mood for that specific book for about 6 hours max. So I need to finish that book in that frame of time, which again, easy for like maybe a 200-page max book. Not so easy when you're dealing with books like these, right? When you're dealing with like an 800-page fantasy tome or 400 pages of a thicker sci-fi. Like, that is definitely a bad habit of mine and a stupid thing that I needed to do. Like, I remember I was reading The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrew Stewart, and I wasn't super enjoying it, which is probably stemming into this as well. That when I'm not really enjoying a book, but I'm enjoying it, it's one of those things that I'm like, it's not enough to DNF it. Like, I do want to know what happens, and I am enjoying the story. It's not a bad story. When I'm sitting in a book like that, I just want to get done with it. I want to put it off my plate and get through it. So I was reading this one day, and I had the audiobook, and I kept pushing it faster and faster and faster so that I could finish it in a like 4-hour time frame, which is ridiculous, because this is 435 pages of an epic fantasy book. Like, that's ridiculous. And as soon as I couldn't do it in that short time frame, even on 3 times speed, however fast I was listening to it at, I was mad at myself, because I was like, oh, I just want to be done with this book. Why can't I get through it faster? I couldn't tell you why. This is a weird habit of mine. Definitely a weird thing of me. I miss being able to really enjoy a book and like re-pick it up every couple days, and like really just like comb my way through it and sink my teeth into it. Because even I have hard times with that with high fantasy, because if I don't finish this in a short amount of time, I will put it down and pick something else up, and then it's suddenly been sitting on my to be read pile for months. I've done that with Valor, which is the sequel to Malice. I'm still only just over halfway through it, and I've put it back because there's so many other things that I want to read that I can read faster. So I put down these epic fantasies because I can't read them in a fast, concise manner, which is just ridiculous, because if I actually put the time in, a couple days a week, I could finish them. So that one's a weird little bad habit of mine as a mood reader that is connected to reading slumps, that is connected to being a mood reader just in general. That one is kind of a long-winded bad habit of mine. The reading slumps, the mood reading, and the trying to consume a fantasy book in one sitting, which is, again, not possible. I had someone on TikTok tell me, they're like, well, you should read Brandon Sanderson's The Way of Kings, and I'm like, I have. First of all. Second of all, I also want to film a challenge where I read The Way of Kings in 24 hours, because the audiobook is 45 hours long. So if you read it at double time speed, it's possible to read in 24 hours. And I swear to God, I don't know, there's something wrong wired in my brain when it comes to trying to finish books at top speed. I think it's like based in, you know, that feeling when we were kids, when we could sit for hours on end because we had nothing else to do, and we could read and consume a book entirely in a day. I think it's that feeling of being able to do that, because when I was little, I did that occasionally, but not regularly, and it was just the greatest feeling. I was like, yeah, I read this book in an entire day. And then as I got older, that became easier depending on the kind of book I was reading. So, you know, just little things like that. Bad habits as a reader. So the next like category of bad reading habits or bad habits as a reader, it generally is probably the more divisive one, which is destruction, I put in air quotes, of books. Namely, oh, I don't know, breaking spines, dog-earing pages, annotating your books as you read, that kind of a thing. Literally putting wear into the books. Now, I am a big portrayer and a big doer of all said things. I do not care if I wreck a book. I have found myself many a times in university reading a book so viciously that I break the spine and pages fall out, which, you know, not ideal. But it happens sometimes, and that's okay. That's okay. So let's talk about the things that people get all up in arms about. One of the biggest things I've seen recently is people being scared to break spines because they don't want to break like the prettiness of the spine. Listen, you're reading the damn book. It's not a decor piece. It's fine if the spine gets a little crinkly. it's okay. No one's gonna notice that. And it makes it easier for you to read, especially these big boys like this, because I know a lot of these paperbacks are pretty stiff, so you need to like massage the spine for it to even lay open in any way. But like, break the spines. Leave marks on your spine. Nobody is gonna care. And in my opinion, that makes the book look even prettier because it means it's been read. It's been loved. One of the reasons why I love buying used books, because you often have those signs of someone else who has loved it previously. And I love that about books, is when they actually show their wear and tear. In university, I actually took a course that was like the history of the book, and we did a little bit of research and talking about marginalia, which is like finding the little notations and things from really, really old books, all of the stuff in the margins. It's marginalia. It's a beautiful word, and it's beautiful to see in books because you get, I don't know, a little bit of insight into the person who was reading this and making notes on the book before. It's one of my favorite things, which leads us into annotation. As you guys know, big purveyor of annotations in this household. We love it. We do it all the time. Leaving notes and like thinking things through and underlining beautiful quotes or like really thought-provoking quotes or things that make you mad or like reacting to stuff is my favorite thing to do. I started annotating back in university for the first time, although I was before that a person who would be a little bit rougher with their books. I think at one point I was a little worried about breaking spines just because everyone else was, but then I realized that it really doesn't matter at all. And so I would be like leaving my books on my desk, you know, wherever I was reading it, I would just like flatten it on my desk and be like, okay, awesome, let's go. And that kind of a thing. I just leave it open and I would stick pencils in it, put whatever you can to mark your page and that kind of stuff. But I really started annotating in university because one of my professors actually told us that reading with a pen in hand or a pencil or whatever, or a notebook by your side, makes you a more active reader, right? Because you're actively like really absorbing the story that way, which really helps when you're reading things like classics. I took that out of university because I really liked doing that. I really liked having a pen in hand. And now I take that into the books that I read around me. One of the things that I have noticed though is that I don't annotate every single book that I read. One, because I pick up books from my library and I don't annotate those. That's bad. I don't even fold the pages of that. I just leave it as pristine as possible because they're not my books. Some of the books that I pick up I don't annotate, and I kind of get a sense of, even before I pick it up, whether or not I'm going to annotate the book. So for a weird example, like I knew kind of automatically going into things like Stardust Thief or The Final Strife that I was probably going to annotate because I was doing a video for those and I just wanted to really enjoy them, and that's usually what I do when I really enjoy a book. Things like a lot of my YA books I don't usually annotate, which is very strange because I think it's a weird thought process of me where I am in my reading now, being like, oh, I'm not going to enjoy this as much, so I don't want to actually mark it up in case I get rid of the book. I will also know within the first few pages of reading whether or not I want to annotate it or not. Or if I'm like really hyped for a book, I will have my pen with me no matter what. Or if I'm doing a reread, like I did recently of Priory of the Orange Tree, I was prepared to go in and annotate it because I didn't annotate it the first time because I listened to it from audiobook the first time, mostly. Coming in again with the annotation materials was just so much fun, and I loved it so much. But it is a joy to annotate books, in my opinion. It's leaving things on the page that are not necessarily intelligent whatsoever. Sometimes when I'm like really into a book and really thinking about it, then my brain will kick into like the English major brain and it'll be a little bit more intelligent, but most of the time it's just little eyes reacting to something, or just like oh my god, or like exclamation points when action kicks up, or just like I'll underline a line and just react to it in the margins. I've seen so many people on the book internet like making art out of their annotations. Like it's like looking at their annotations is beautiful, to the point of like you can't read that book anymore because it's been covered in annotations and like sticky notes and papers and highlights and everything, which is fine. Like they're really getting everything out of the book that they want to, and it looks like a piece of art when you're done. And I just love that about annotating. And I know so many people who don't like marking up their books in any way, and I don't understand that. Like having a pristine book on your shelves is all fine and dandy. Yeah, they're beautiful, but don't worry about damaging your book. Like if you're that worried about it, get an ebook. right? Like, it's paper. It's gonna show signs of you reading it just by you touching it, because that's just what happens with books. But yeah, I'm not here to judge you if you don't want to destroy your books. They're your books. As I said at the top of this video, do what you want with them. Treat them like your children if you want. Throw them against a wall if you want, although be gentle with that because you might make a dent in your wall. Do what you want with your books, and I will do what I want with my books, right? Like, I love the signs of reading on my books because reading is an absolute pleasure of mine, especially when I'm really, really loving a book or really just really into it and seeing that physical sign of annotation. So I know a lot of people on TikTok and the book internet right now are doing like the flag thing, which is something that I used to do when I was in university. I wonder if I have any flagged books to show you, actually. For example, my copy of Emma that I studied in university, I was a flagger back then. I would have specific, at the time, specific colors that I would do for like my personal flags, and then the flags that we would discuss in class, like if we went to a direct page and discussed a specific passage. It got to a point where, as you could tell by the sheer amount of flags on this tiny little book, I was buying way too many packs of flags to sustain my annotation journey throughout books, especially in university. In university, I kept it up because it was just something that I did. But when I was out of university and I was reading books for joy and just for me, I kept flagging in some instances. I don't know if I still have any books on my actual shelves right now that have flags in them, besides the university ones, but I changed my annotation style to, for a while, I just annotated without marking the pages where I annotated, because that's fine. You see them when you flip through. And now, I don't know if you saw on Priory, I do this now. Imagine how many damn flags that would be, because there's sections of this book where I annotated every single page. So it would be like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and almost probably thousands of flags, because this is like an 800-page book, right? What I do instead is I found this on TikTok. It is not my idea, and I can't remember the original purveyor of this technique of annotating, but what they do is they take a marker and they run it down the length of the page like that on the page that they marked. And another one that I saw recently was people use washi tape to mark on the side, because then it like stays flush to the book, which I think is an absolutely brilliant way of doing it as well. I like the marker one because markers are easy to come by and it looks so cool by the end of it. It looks like sprayed edges, and it just like, you pick one that like matches the cover of your book and you're golden. And I do that with many of my books now, like with Hannah Long's Hall of Smoke and Temple. I haven't really annotated Hall of Smoke that much because apparently I get too into it when I'm in the middle of it. But again, with the markers on the side of the book, I think leaving signs of your reading behind shouldn't be considered a bad habit, even though I'm including it in this video of bad habits. I think it should be something that is your own. It's a unique sign of your books, right? As I said, do what you want to your own books, read what you want. Anyways, my friends, this long-winded, very discussion-y video aside, we started with DNFs, and then I talked about like reading slumps and being a mood reader and reading multiple books at the same time, which led into my weird specific habit of trying to consume fantasy books in just one sitting. And then we talked about the destruction of books. And yes, I mentioned it very briefly, but I dog ear things all the time. Sometimes when I don't have a marker nearby to mark the edge of a book, I will dog ear the bottom of it very tiny, just a little burp, so that I remember where my annotations are. Or if there's a specific annotation that I really want to remember, I will do that as well. And I think it's wonderful that, especially on TikTok right now, there's one creator that I follow, I believe her name is Smee. Oh, I think that's her handle. I'm not entirely sure, but her channel I found through her like journey of a book, where she shows this absolutely destroyed book by the end of it reading it, and then like she shows how it got there, because she just uses her books to her pleasure. Like sometimes if she has a hardback, she uses the actual copy of it to write lists or her reviews or her thoughts of the books. And I have never done that myself because I usually read really dark hardbacks and I don't have a white pen, but that would be so brilliant to like fill this up with notes of things. Sometimes when she reads paperbacks, there's like pages missing, or she does collages on the pages and she takes it and she throws it in her bag. So of course it's gonna get a little bit marked, that kind of thing. And I think it's so lovely to see how people read their books and to end their journey with that book and see the marks of that journey on it. I just think it's so wonderful. Let me know down below what some of your bad reading habits are, because I would love to discuss this with you. My three main big ones are the DNFing, the weird mood mood reading slumping thing that I do, and my annotations, I guess, or my destruction of books that some people would consider. I think it was such an interesting topic to think about, and I didn't realize I would have so much to say. But thank you, Sophie, for giving me this video idea, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Anyways, my friends, thank you so much for watching. Leave me a little bookstack emoji down below if you made it to the end, because I love seeing those in the comments. Anyways, my friends, I will catch you in another video very soon. Stay kind and keep on reading.